Unlike many sports where women are looked at for their body physique rather than their performance in sport, CrossFit respects women as competitors. When discussed by reporters, it is rare to talk about their outfits, hairstyle, or other feminine characteristics. The focus is more about their training regime, their improvements from previous competitions, and their current physical performances. A CrossFit female participant made a comment about her appreciation of CrossFit for leaving questions about relationships and clothing preferences behind. These athletes are extremely skilled at what they do and are participating to perform as athletes, not as figures representing what women are supposed to look like and act like. In these pictures, you can see how truly skilled these athletes are. This doesn't come naturally. They work extremely hard to achieve this kind of strength, and they deserve to be respected for it. In CrossFit, the focus is not about looks. It is far more important to discuss the amount of weight, the time of completion, or the overall strength of a competitor. This is what the sport is truly about. The phrase "strong is beautiful" is widely used in many female sports. It is meant to put the social expectations for women to be cute and pretty into a new perspective. Instead of the goal being what females look like, the focus has shifted to functionality, being strong. Strength cannot be represented solely by looks. While it may be expressed in the way an athlete looks, strength comes from within. The phrase "strong is beautiful" puts down the typical fear of looking masculine due to muscular structure. It instead replaces the masculine judgment with beautiful. As you can see in the pictures displayed, these female competitors are portrayed as strong and beautiful while being active, performing and breaking barriers, not smiling with their hair dressed in bows and their outfit colorful and pink. CrossFit emphasizes what the body can do, not what it looks like. Here we see the 10 athletes featured in a CrossFit article titled 10 Athletes to Watch in 2017. Notice the amount of women featured in this list. If you count, there are exactly 5 men and 5 women represented. This makes sense considering the CrossFit Games involve both men and women. Therefore, it makes sense for both sexes to be equally represented, as they are both competing. But this is rare for most sports. When we think of the most popular sports to watch, we probably think of football, basketball, and baseball, the big 3. And when we think of the athletes that play those sports, we probably don't think of women. The WNBA and professional softball teams are not common things for us to watch, and when we think of women playing football, we probably think of women running around in lingerie. This is because our society and the media that covers most sport competitions doesn't give respectful attention to female athletes. It's all about masculinity and praise of male athletes because they're supposedly better competitors. They give us a better game to watch. Well, CrossFit is an exception. It was noted that in the 10th annual CrossFit Games, both men's and women's events were given equal broadcasting time. Fans watching the games are interested in women's performances too. But why is this true in CrossFit and not in other sports? Well, that brings us to the next point of discussion, the workout routine. Unlike most sports that have different rules and regulations for women and men, the CrossFit Games have the same physical exercise routine. It is assumed and then proven that women can do the same activities that men can do. They don't necessarily have to do it with the same amount of weight, but they are just as capable as completing the exercise. This contrasts with sports like basketball, where women use a smaller ball, or sports like baseball, where the sport has changed so much for women that it actually has its own name of softball. CrossFit uses the same platform, the same exercise activities, and the same arena, filled with fans for both men and women, as equal participants of the game. Just as women perform, are respected, and are equally represented as men are in the CrossFit sport, they are also eligible to receive the same award for excellent performance. At each annual CrossFit game, 1 male and 1 female are deemed the fittest man on earth and the fittest woman on earth for that year. With this title comes prize money. While other professional sports have huge gaps in pay depending on gender, the prize money for these 2 awards is exactly the same, as it should be. This makes sense considering that both recipients put in comparable hard work and dedication to being the best at what they do. It wouldn't make sense for one to be rewarded more than the other. This is a move that should be spread into other sports. CrossFit originated with gender equality already built into it. There was no change that had to happen to overcome the typically uneven spectrum of male versus female representation. Is it possible for other sports to make the change of equality between genders? Or is CrossFit able to do it because that's the way they have always been?
Typically, men's and women's sports are formatted in a way that makes the sport strictly men's or strictly women's. For example, men's and women's volleyball net heights differ. Men's gymnastics has 6 events and women's gymnastics has 4. Men's basketballs are bigger than women's basketballs. These differences are a common trend in the world of sport, but there are a few exceptions. Kelsey P. wrote an article entitled "Fit is a Female Problem," which shows that CrossFit, a quickly rising sport, displays numerous efforts and aspects of gender impartiality throughout. This popular sport exhibits the ideas of the social scientific role theory, which ignores the common roles and relations of gender. Both genders are equally represented. They both receive equal broadcast airtime, and in individual events are awarded the same amount of prize money. Essentially, the male and female participants are treated equally. They are, simply put, athletes. Instead of having differences among the standards for all of the athletes, everything is exactly the same. The CrossFit Games has the same exact workouts for men and women. Events like the squat clean pyramid, handstand walks, trail runs, ocean swims, all of these have equal participation of men and women. Both genders deadlift, burpee, pistol squat, snatch, row, and box jump. Athletes all sweat, succeed, and fail. CrossFit athletes compete in the same arena at the same time. Neither gender is favored, while gender partiality is practiced. Both genders are held to the same expectations and standards, which is something that is pretty unique to CrossFit. CrossFit doesn't adhere to norms that have been established in the sporting world. Its publicity has the power to promote equality because of its relative newness. There are team events which consist of men and women competing together. In the team event, each team consists of 2 men and 2 women who join forces to compete co-ed. Though there are sports like track and field that do technically have team awards, men and women do not have the opportunity to compete directly with one another. The team events contribute to the proportionally blended population of CrossFit athletes and fans. The top 10 athletes to look for in the 2017 CrossFit Games are 5 men and 5 women. These athletes have excelled in CrossFit and are expected to do well in the Games. Typically, male athletes are more talked about, but in CrossFit, both genders are represented. Men and women do CrossFit. Men and women watch CrossFit. Men and women officiate the CrossFit Games, and men and women sponsor the athletes and awards. There is finally a sport where all athletes can compete, not to look the best, but to be the best. Removing the expectations of gender has allowed athletes to escape gender stereotypes, and by applying the role theory, gives men and women the opportunity to prove their own worth as an athlete. Please consider the following. CrossFit is currently a 2-sex classification system, which requires athletes to choose between male and female categories. Is it possible to make CrossFit an even more inclusive environment if an athlete does not identify strictly male or female?
I'm going to start out by picking out the one aspect of the CrossFit Games that does not fit into the feminist ideas we've been talking about: clothing. The majority of women wear sports bras and spandex, while the men wear short-sleeve shirts and long shorts. This is similar to beach volleyball in that there's no legitimate reason for women to be so scantily clad. The women are not wearing shirts in order to overemphasize their sexuality, thus making them seem less threatening to men. However, the uniforms are not always like this, and men can be seen wearing no shirts while women wear shirts and pants. This observation should not undermine the great progress that CrossFit has made in terms of feminism. According to Mesner and Sabo, liberal feminism argued that women had the same inalienable rights that men had. Women's rights activists stressed the similarities between the sexes, embraced a fundamental individualism, and pressed for equal opportunity for women in education, government, and the economy. So, liberal feminism focuses on what makes women and men similar. You can clearly tell because of everything we've talked about that the CrossFit Games are a great example of this. Rather than focusing on what makes people different, CrossFit emphasizes the power of the individual and downplays the differences between men and women. Women get the same amount of prize money, compete in the same events, and have the same opportunities. Mesner and Sabo state that radical feminists argue that equal opportunity for women within the present society is impossible because the system itself is fundamentally patriarchal in structure. All right, let's break this down. Radical feminism is saying that because society inherently oppresses women, women will never be able to have equal opportunities in today's society. Well, when it comes to CrossFit, it is clear that women have equal opportunities, and it is part of today's society, with competitors coming from all different parts of the world. Radical feminists believe that there is a paradox when it comes to female participation in sports. As athletes become increasingly female, coaches and other people in power become increasingly male. This is not the case in the CrossFit Games, where the coaches and judges are made up equally of. We're going to leave you with one last question to think about. So, is CrossFit successful in providing equal opportunities for men and women because, from the liberal feminist perspective, equality is possible because men and women are fundamentally similar? Or because, from the radical feminist perspective, a completely new and separate system was created with equality in mind?
Equal representation of men and women in sport is not typically seen. It is common to see hegemonic masculinity. CrossFit, as a new and on-the-rise sport, is taking a different approach on this norm. CrossFit is a representation of gender equality in the physical activities performed, the media coverage, and the respect given to these hardworking athletes. This is a representation that there is hope for change in the future, and this can spread to other sports, diminishing the typical hegemonic masculinity we see today.